So I'm going to talk real quick about how to scale something down for our solar system project, but just for any time you're doing a scale to make something bigger or smaller. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a scale. So we're going to decide how big the sun is going to be in this example, and then we're going to make everything. We're going to shrink everything else down to that, depending on that same scale. Okay, so the first thing I need to do when I'm shrinking or growing something is I need to know the actual size of something and the scale size of something. So we're going to use the sun as our scale. We're going to shrink everything down. For this project, we're going to make the sun a 2-foot ball. Okay, so I need to know the actual size of the sun. I'm going to write that here. And I know that the sun, because I looked it up, is 864,900 miles around or diameter. Okay. So I know the actual size of the sun. Now I need to know the scale size. I'm going to make that sun 2 feet for the purposes of our demonstration here. Okay, so we have a sun that's this big and we're going to shrink it down to this big. Okay, now I want to know, like, okay, how am I going to compare that to how big Earth is, how far Earth is, how big is Mercury, Venus, all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, this is my scale. I'm setting my scale here because I know this object. I know how big it is. I know how big I want it to be. Okay, I'm going to set that equal to the Earth. And again, I need to know the actual size and the scale size. Okay, and so I can look up that information, and then I'm going to put over here all the information that I know. Okay, so I know that the Earth is 7,916 mile diameter. So it's much, much smaller than the sun. I can look at these numbers and say, oh man, that's a lot different. What we do with scale is we scale things down so we can see, like physically see the difference. I can see the difference in these numbers, but it's not until I can really put those things in context right next to each other to see what that means and give it a little easier understanding. So before we even start, I'm going to take 2 feet. I'm going to draw a 2-foot line. So we're shrinking the sun down from almost 900,000 miles to 2 feet. So this line is going to be 24 inches, which is 2 feet. So there's a 2-foot line, just giving you an idea of how big the sun is. Okay, so I know how big the Earth is. I don't know. The question I'm trying to figure out is what is the scale size? If the sun is 2 feet, how big is the Earth going to be? Okay, so I'm going to put an X here. That's going to be my variable that I'm trying to figure out. Now I'm going to do something called cross multiplying and dividing. And the reason it's called cross multiply and divide is because that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to cross multiply. So that means this equals, I'm going to make an X here. Okay, so I'm going to multiply this by this. Okay, so that gives me 2 times 7,916. I'm going to move down my equals sign. And I'm going to cross multiply here. Okay, 864,900 times x equals 864,900x. Okay, now I'm just going to start solving this like I would any equation. So the first thing I need to do is take care of my multiplication. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 times 7,916. Okay, so when I do that math, it ends up being 15,832. So I'm going to move that down. I'm going to move my equal sign down. And this, nothing has changed. So I'm going to also move that down. So I have 15,832 equals 864,900x. Usually when we do these, your x is smaller. So this might look weird. Usually you're doing like, 5 plus 6 equals 3x or whatever. This is just like, it's just a big number. Okay, so this is the same thing as like 3x or 5x, but it's 864,900x. Okay. All right, so the next thing I need to do is I need to get this x all by itself. So I'm going to divide this side by itself. I'm going to divide 864,900 by 864,900. Okay, the reason I'm doing that is because this divided by this is going to give me 1x, okay, which we would also just call x. Since I divided this on this side, I need to do the same thing on the opposite side. So 864,900. So I'm going to divide 15,834 by 864,900. Okay, and that gives me 0.0 0.018. Okay, so this is 0.018 feet is how big Earth is going to be. So that's pretty small, and we're going to want to turn that into something that we can like actually recognize. Okay, the easiest thing to do here to turn this into inches, because that's tough for me to visualize what a 0.018 foot is I can just multiply this by 12, because I know there are 12 inches in each foot. So if I do this, and again, this is to convert from feet to inches, and you might not always want to do this, but right now we do because this is such a weird number. Okay, I'm going to take this 0.018 feet and I'm going to multiply by 12 because I'm going to change colors here so we know that we're doing a different operation. So 0.018 feet, I'm going to multiply that by 12 because I know there are 12 inches in each foot, and that's going to give me about 0.22 inches. Okay, so 0.2, we'll do a little rounding, 0.22. This is close to a quarter of an inch. A quarter of an inch would be 0.25, right? So in our case here, I'm just going to look at my ruler here and say, okay, well, here's an entire inch. Let's do these. This is an entire inch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are quarter inches. So Earth is going to be about this big at this scale. So we drew our 2-foot sun here. Now I'm going to draw my quarter-inch Earth. So here's the sun. That is how big the Earth would be. Okay. This is why we scale things. This number looks a lot bigger than this. Wow, man, the sun is a lot bigger than Earth. But until we can visualize it, we don't really get a great understanding of how big Earth is. And for this project, we want to compare Earth, we want to compare Mars, Venus, Jupiter, we want to compare all of them to the sun, and we also want to do this with distance. So when you are doing your scales, whether you are trying to shrink a planet or a distance, I'm going to go through this process. I'm going to cross multiply and divide. There are a few shortcuts that you'll probably figure out after you do 1 or 2 of these, but this is the basic process that we go through to make something either smaller or bigger. So again, we need to know the actual size, scale size. Okay, this is what you're using unless you decide to change the size of your sun, which is fine. You just change this, okay? And then over here, you are going to do whatever planet. So this one happens to be Earth. Okay, but if you're going to do Jupiter, Mars, whatever, you need to know the diameter of those planets and then put that number in there.